It's time again for Super Famicom games on the Retro Hunting Adventures, and you'll hear all about them after these words from MegaRan.
Yo, this is MegaManFan, and you need to rock and or roll on over to Mr. MegaManFan's YouTube channel, because it's all that rush to make it happen. Peace!
So, once again, on a local hunting expedition, I looked out and found 4 Super Famicom games at Pop Culture Exchange for $10. This one is called Hakuna Super Ganba League 93. And, as you can see, it is a baseball game. Here's a little explanation of what we're looking at, courtesy of GiantBomb.com. This is the sequel to Hakunetsu Pro Yakyu Ganba League, otherwise known as Extra Innings. It has a cartoony presentation emphasizing arcade-style fast gameplay over more serious simulation elements. All the included teams are fictional. The player can even edit in their own. The player can choose between a one-off or entering a pennant race, as well as selecting 1 or 2 human players, or letting the CPU play against itself in watch mode. This is the second game in the series, with a third game called Hakunetsu Pro Yakyu 94 Ganba League 3 released the following year. Only the first game in the series, Extra Innings, ever left Japan. Now, out of the 4 Super Famicom games that I picked up, I would say this one was the most playable. It's, as noted, pretty easy to get into without serious hardcore baseball team management options. You just pitch, field, and bat. Any baseball game that lets me do those things without requiring me to learn a whole bunch of extra shit is very playable in either English or Japanese, so this one you could actually handle without an intimate knowledge of the language. Sports games sometimes work out that way, and sometimes if they're really heavy on the management side or the realism side of things, they don't work so well for English speakers and readers, but a gaijin like me, no problem with this game. I would say this one was worth it. Next up on the list is Pachi Slot. Yeah, I wasn't so sure about this one when I picked it up. Jisun Pachi Slot is as advertised. It is a slot machine game, but for the sheer novelty and curiosity, I had to give this one a try. Now, once again, Giant Bomb was a plethora of information about this series, which apparently is a very long-running series. There were 6 entries for Super Famicom alone. These are all developed by Sammy, based on slot machines in actual pachinko parlors, and players are allowed to practice, quote-unquote, without having to break the bank playing the real thing. Well, isn't that wonderful? You can teach your children gambling without having them lose real money. Then they can go lose real money. Isn't that wonderful? Well, I'm sure that most parents kept this far away from their children, right? We all know children won't just pick up any Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was dead broke, I couldn't picture this. Put it in their console and play it, right? So probably some kids unintentionally got introduced to gambling thanks to this game, and the fact there are like 30 more games in this series, I mean, seriously. Turns out that Jisun Pachi Slot has been on damn near everything right up to the present day. There are many, many iterations of this, but God bless them, it's boring. I mean, the most exciting part of this was figuring out which buttons to press to actually make the slot machine work. I finally figured out that the R trigger was the coin reset, and that the down was the pull the lever, and then you had to hit Y, B, and A, or was it X, B, and A? I forget which, but you had to hit those buttons each to make one of the reels stop. And I suppose if you got good enough timing, you could actually line up combinations horizontally, vertically, diagonally, whatever way they want you to line them up in this particular slot machine. But I grew tired of this quickly. The novelty of actually figuring out how to control it was the sole lure here. Now, the fact that it has multiple different slot machines, I will give it a plus for that. At least they didn't stick you with just one crappy slot machine like a lot of 1980s PC slot machine games where it was like fruit slots and you just get one machine with 3 reels and the same fruits over and over and over. So A for creativity, F minus for fun. Yeah, this isn't F is for friends who do stuff together, U is for you and me, and is for no way in hell I'm playing this down here in the deep blue sea. So let's move on and hopefully get to something better. And that would be Larry Nixon? Who the fuck is Larry Nixon and why is he on a title from Japan? Larry Nixon's Super Bass Fishing. And yes, that's bass, not bass. In the Mega Man and bass games, it's definitely bass because it's a musical pun, but this is a fishing game, so it's bass. That is the difference. Please learn the two and never ever refer to it as Mega Man and Bass. Even if you've played Mega Man 8, do not refer to him as Bass, ever. It's bass. Everything is a pun. Do you get this, people? Rockman, rock music, rock and roll, his sister Roll. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked here. I really wanted to know who the hell Larry Nixon was and why he got his own video game. So I looked it up. And apparently he really is a famous fisherman from Bee Branch, Arkansas, known as The General on Twitter. Wow, really? Okay, this guy is like 70 years old, and I guess he uses social media more than I do. For a great low rate you can get online, call Larry Nixon and save some time. This guy has won a lot of tournaments. He's been a top 25 Angler of the Year the majority of his tour years, according to the ever-reliable Wikipedia. But his best finish in the Forest Wood Cup came in 2010 when he finished 3rd. He started tournament fishing in 1977, taking home $600. And yes, his total career earnings as of the entering of this article was $1,634,858.60. So, needless to say, this guy in this sport was like the king of fishermen, which is why he got his own game in Japan, released on September 23rd, 1994, and later re-released in the United States and Canada as TNN Bass Tournament of Champions in recognition of the Nashville Network, which later became Spike TV, which later became the Paramount Network. Okay, so I would rate this one as the second most fun out of the 4 Super Famicom games I picked up in this set, with Sammy's Pachi Slot game obviously coming dead last. Now, plus on this one is that it's pretty obvious what you need to do, even in Japanese. They put an area marked with a dashed line, and you drive your boat to that area, and you cast your lure, and if you've played any fishing game ever, you know what to do. You set the power, you release, and it flies, and then it drops into the water, and you wait for a bite, and if you get one, you reel it in. But in this case, I missed because I didn't let him fully snag it, so I reeled in too early. But this I could actually see if I had the time and the patience and really wanted to sit there and master it. I could actually conceivably get good at this. I don't know if I would have that kind of patience or enthusiasm, but the subgenre of fishing games has generally not been my bag. There's one or two that I've actually really enjoyed over the years, and I wouldn't say the one where you get Froggy back for Big Cat in Sonic Adventure is one of them, so that would be the lowest on the fishing list, and this would be somewhere in the middle to the upper high side. So, Larry Nixon, your input into this game was obviously worth it. Either you endorsed it well or you actually led to the design in certain areas because it worked out. Last but not least, Super Black Bass 2, another fishing game. I already had a completing box copy of Super Black Bass for Super Nintendo. This was the most yellowed and stained looking cart of the bunch, and it took me 4 Q-tips to clean it, so maybe some angler actually took this game fishing with him in Japan and sat in his boat with a little color TV and ran a lead from his motor on his boat, generated enough electricity somehow doing that to actually power the TV and the Super Famicom and play this game, because otherwise I don't know how this cart got this stained and this yellowed, and how I had to spend almost 10 minutes cleaning it, which I cut out of this video, along with a really boring part between entering my name and actually getting to the competition. So I've saved you all a whole lot of time. You're welcome! And as fishing games go, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but it's not as much fun as Larry Nixon was. So once again, Larry Nixon, I didn't know you from shit before I did this video on Super Famicom games, but brother, apparently you know your fishing, because even though this is a sequel to an already established franchise, your game was better. The most fun I had with Super Black Bass 2 was driving the boat around, seeing where I could go. Unfortunately, the amount of territory that you're allowed to explore is very limited, and your boat easily gets caught in the thick grass of this marshy water, so there's not much fun to be had doing that. Once you get to the actual fishing portion, which again, unlike Larry Nixon, they don't actually give you a target to aim for with your boat. You're just taking your chances, hoping to find a good spot to fish. So finally I just picked one, and once I did, boy, I couldn't find shit. I cast it, I looked around, no fish anywhere. As JonTron once famously said, "This is game? I have seen game. This is not game." So we move on from Super Famicom to a bonus game on Gear. Yes, Pac-Man for Game Gear. I thought even if I bombed out on all the Japanese games, I'd have at least one game I could play that I would enjoy. So we're going to put it in the old Game Gear, recapped and refurbished by my friend Fix-It Phil. Check him out, tinyurl.com/FixItPhilNE for Nebraska. But I'm not going to make you watch me play it on the Game Gear. I'm actually going to capture some footage via emulation, so it's a little cleaner and a lot easier to understand, which wasn't quite going to work with the Super Famicom games, because finding Japanese ROMs, not always the easiest thing to do, and I didn't have an immediate way to dump the cartridges, plus I had to clean them to even test them, let alone dump them. So this, on the other hand, I could easily fire up in the emulator and show you all that this is a superior handheld version, at least, of Pac-Man compared to some of the other versions available, like on Game Boy, which is entirely in black and white or shades of green, depending on what kind of Game Boy you have or what kind of emulator you're looking at it in. Perhaps you're playing it with a color palette on the Super Game Boy, in which case, more power to you, but graphically I like the presentation of this version of Pac-Man. It actually has to scroll the screen, so instead of trying to squash it all down into one little screen, you get to see the full maze at a resolution that makes sense, although you're not seeing part of the playfield a lot of the time, which means you don't really know what the ghosts are up to. You might not know if there's a fruit available for you to pick up, so there are limitations to playing it this way, but the limitations aren't so drastic that I would say it's unplayable. In fact, out of the 5 games that I got in this week's Retro Hunting Adventures, this one is by and far the winner of the hunt. I spent $16 total for these 5 games, and Pac-Man on Game Gear was number 1 with a bullet, followed by either the baseball game or Larry Nixon's fishing, and Super Black Bass 2 coming in 4th, and Pachi Slot coming in dead fucking last. And that one was the second most expensive of the bunch. That was $4. This was $5.99, and it's 5 times better. So long story short, Super Famicom games are a mixed bag. You never quite know what you're going to get unless you actually know the game in advance, like Breath of Fire or Chrono Trigger. So sometimes you just gotta give it a whirl and see what you get. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thanks for watching.